Turkish rock, as mentioned in one of the previous award-winning videos of this channel, is generally divided into three distinct phases. The first is Anadolu Rock, or Anatolian Rock. Primarily a fusion genre between 1950s American rock and roll, 1960s British psychedelia, and Turkish folk music, Anadolu Rock rose on the shoulders of giants like Barış Manço, Cem Karaca, Erkin Koray, Selda Bağcan, and later found an audience worldwide by its 21st century usage as hip-hop sample fodder. The second is, for the lack of a better term, Türkçe Rock. Occurring somewhere around the late 1990s and the early 2000s, the Türkçe Rock wave is perhaps best emblemized by the two bands, Duman and Mor Ötesi. Capturing the hearts and minds of what I will later call the cnbc-e generation, the second wave should really be commended for the way they reclaimed the Turkish rock scene from the jaws of mediocrity. Then came the third new. Third New is an original translation. The wave is endemically called Üçüncü Yeniler in Turkey. The name was coined by Spotify for a playlist where they grouped a new wave of Turkish alternative bands in the mid-2010s. These bands shared an almost garage-like rawness, a detached outlook, and an emphasis on lyricality. This emphasis on lyricality is perhaps what prompted Spotify to christen this wave as the third new, because the first and second new waves were actually of the literary variety. The first new was also called the Garip or the Strange, named after the 1941 book that started the movement. Garip the book was a collection of poems written and edited by these three fine gentlemen, Oktay Rıfat, Melih Cevdet, and Orhan Veli. These three poets, all of them from the final Ottoman and the first Republican generation, warned the general public with these words they put on the cover. Bu kitap sizi alışılmış şeylerden şüpheye davet edecektir. Meaning, this book will invite you to doubt the things habituated. And it did. The first new's approach to poetry was a complete subversion of the literary norms of the time. It shuffled away the old syllabic meters and rhyming methods, introduced common topics, and used words considered too crude for poetry at the time. The first new gents argued that anyone can write poetry about anything. It was better for the art if the artist was free, which is of course essentially very punk. The second new was a counter-reactionary wave in the sense that it was critical of the criticism put forward by the first new. Spearheaded by Muzaffer İlhan Erdoğan, this 1950s literary wave featured a more impressionistic and transformative attitude. Their mood was often quite bleak. In many ways, if the first new was red, the color of revolution, the second new was definitely blue. So Spotify's naming of the third new was, for these reasons, quite spot on. These bands did indeed feature the rawness of the first new and the bleak outlook of the second. They were also characterized by their long and clunky names like Son Feci Bisiklet or Yüz Yüzeyken Konuşuruz or Büyük Ablukada, all of them phrases that would not go amiss on the notebooks of a second new poet. And actually, last one, Büyük Ablukada, is taken from a poem by Turgut Uyar, a prominent second new poet. It's hard to pinpoint the exact beginning of the third new, as most of the bands now definitively considered to be a part of the movement were producing underground releases during Türkçe Rock's heyday. These bands constituted the first digital generation of Turkish rock music, so their songs were promulgated on forums and found its initial audiences through dinky MP3 players. So exactly when this wave started is hard to tell, but the year in which it came alive is as clear as day, 2017. Also marked by the release of two seminal Turkish hip-hop records, Ezaz Müptezel and Ağaç Kakan's Anaşkvit, 2017 saw two incredibly influential records come in and crystallize the sound of the movement. One was the debut release of Jacuzzi, called Fantezi Müzik, and the other was the sophomore studio effort of Büyük Ablukada, called Fırtınayt. Both of these releases kept artistic stylings of the third new we've come to know and love, but added more. The lyrics still dealt with the personal pains and frustrations of individual human beings. They still featured a common and simple language, only now they also featured a rebellion against the musical norms, whereas the prior third new releases primarily showcased simple chords. Fantezi Müzik in Fırtınayt sought a more progressive layout, often changing moods and intensity within the same song. Yaşıyor mu geleceği? Challenging the listener and keeping them on their toes. Now, bands nominally considered under the third new banner, like Palmiyeler and Hedonitopia, had already included synth sounds and a dream disco atmosphere in their music, of course. So this was a peak in progression, not a final destination that just appeared out of thin air one day. This progression, though, continued as more and more third new bands joined the fray after 2017, abandoning their simple guitars and embracing fruity loops and noisy waves. So soon enough, the third new playlist on Spotify started to sound like this. This 2017 peak was definitely followed up with an avalanche. So it wouldn't be too amiss to argue that before Fantasy Music in Fırtınayt, the third new was the younger, broodier, and less presentable sibling of Türkçe Rock. The people who knew them, but with the release of these two records, third new came alive and finally found its footing in the mainstream. Now, this third wave of Turkish rock had its own color. Anadolu Rock was red, Türkçe Rock was blue, and there the third new was yellow. See you next time.